Hello everyone and welcome to another Sphere Drones webinar. My name is Paris Kokinos. We're just going to hold up a couple more minutes, just wait for a couple more people to join the webinar, but we shouldn't hold up too much longer, probably another minute or so, so just bear with us one moment. Thank you. Alrighty, so I'd like to firstly introduce the two presenters today. So we've got Harrison Shalhoub, an account manager from Sphere Drones, and we've also got Graeme Normington, managing director of QSurvey. I'll pass it over to Harrison, who will now be able to present. Go for it, Haz.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paris. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It would seem by now that most of us are working from home, so I hope you're sitting at home or comfortable and ready to enjoy this afternoon. So we're going to run a few polls throughout the webinar today so that we can get a bit of a better understanding of who is our audience today. So please use the GoToWebinar widget that you see, and I'll go to our first poll question. So the first poll question is, are you using drones for indoor inspections? So you should see a widget pop up in front of you. Okay, give it a few more seconds. Okay. So throughout the webinar today, feel free to ask questions through the GoToWebinar widget as well, and we will do some Q&A towards the end of the presentation. As Paris mentioned, my name's Harrison Shalhoub and I'm account manager at Sphere Drones. I also work quite closely with the Flyability products, which are of course used for internal asset inspections. Joining us today is Graeme Normington from QSurveys in Cairns, Queensland, and he's going to be giving us an insight into his operations and how drones have really evolved his business over the last few years. Just want to say a big and quick thank you to Graeme for giving us his time, not only today, but in the preparation for today's webinar. So just a quick introduction for what we'll be going through, touch very quickly on Sphere Drones and then who QSurvey is. And we'll be touching a little bit about implementing drone technology in a traditional business, how drones are changing the inspection process. We'll look at a few case studies and then we'll go to Q&A. So to give you a very brief understanding of Sphere Drones and our capabilities, we provide both sales of hardware and software, but we also do much more than that. So we perform repair and maintenance, training, consulting services, rentals, on-site support, and more recently, enterprise agreements, which you'll start to see come out over the next few months. It's a product that we're very excited about. So our Sydney office opened about 7 years ago now, and our Perth a year ago, a bit over a year ago now. So that's allowed us to have a really nice service footprint around the country. So the second webinar poll today is, do you hold a remote pilot license? And you should see a widget come up. Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Graeme. Graeme, you have a bit of a background well before drones. So why don't you give us a bit of an introduction to who you are and who QSurvey is?
Well, thank you, Harrison, and welcome to the webinar, everybody. QSurvey started about 2 years ago, but prior to that, I set up a business company called Queensland Ship Surveys Proprietary Limited. My background in the shipping industry, the merchant navy, and other associated industries, pardon me, has encompassed confined space inspections throughout that whole career, nearly 20 years at sea, and another 19 years as a marine surveyor, ship surveyor. And then what happened about 2 years ago, I was at a surveyors conference in Sydney, and I was put across the Elios 1, and out of the room of around about 120 people in the audience, other surveyors, I was the only one that made any serious inquiries and placed my order. So another part of the business has grown steadily since then, and what's happened in that time, as well as ordering and taking delivery of the Elios 2, which is a bit of a game changer for us, the business has expanded out into land-based businesses such as mining, petrochemical, power generation, food production, sugar mills, etc., and government utilities as well. Not only the confined space inspections, we've actually diversified into above ground asset inspections, and we concentrated on purchasing and using high-end equipment, drones, as UAVs, and it's a great part of the business. It's been a lot of fun. It's been pretty damn exciting over the years, the last 2 years, and we've had a wonderful association with Sphere Drones, and it's with our Sphere Drones, before you came along, it was somewhat difficult to have access to support, but that's all gone by the wayside now. So that's who we are.
Right. And so, Graeme, why don't you just touch on a little bit about, how your business has developed, over the last few years? You started off with the Flyability Elios 1, you've now got the Elios 2. And can you just talk to some of the assets that you will perform inspections on and what that looks like?
Well, part of our normal business operations in the shipping industry, for example, was climbing into ballast tanks and cofferdams, fuel tanks, anchor chain lockers, and the like. Now, to do that under the old-fashioned way, as I like to say, we had to prepare those spaces, pre-ventilation, risk assessments, setting up scaffolding and staging in these compartments because they can be quite large, and to get good proper access to view the condition of the coatings and the steel in these compartments, you've got to climb up high and look on the top of the ledges. Now, it's really difficult. It's quite dangerous, or always has been. And I've been locked in confined spaces twice in my career. Once in the South China Sea for 9 hours on a ship heading south, and again up in Papua New Guinea. So I know the dangers, the hazards, because I've experienced it firsthand. So since using drones, implementing the drone technology in our confined space inspections, it saves so much time. We can do an inspection, it probably takes about an hour to set up, and then some compartments take 15 or 20 minutes to inspect. Some others take an hour, maybe two. The other day we did, this last week in fact, I did 6 confined spaces with the team in just 2 of us in 7.5 hours. So normally that would take 2.5 to 3 days to do that. So it's been a game changer for us. It's sped up the process of the inspection. We're getting the same type of information, videography, photogrammetry data. Now we can actually measure, take 2D measurements of the damage or deterioration. It's been a real game changer. And for ourselves as a small business, SME, and for industry in general, I believe.
Fantastic. So, Graeme, you touched on a little bit about the time that's been reduced by using drones for inspections. Why don't you just give us a run through of what a typical week would look like in preparation for an inspection, and then going through that process of actually doing the inspection?
Well, pardon me. What we actually do, we plan the following week, the week before, if you will. We don't wait until Monday to see what we're doing for the rest of the week. So we forward plan. We know what assets have to be inspected. We need to know where they're located. We plan for that the week before, and we contact our clients. We have the person that we need to work with on site. We prefer to work with somebody on site familiar with the asset. They could be seeking particular information as to the internal conditions. So we spend quite a bit of time planning out the job and understanding where it is. There could be travel involved. There could be air travel, for example. So that's going to entail discharging batteries and having the equipment ready for shipment by air. Pardon me, and we have to make sure that prior to heading out to the job, all our firmware is up to date, everything is in good condition, ready to go. We do a pre-confined space inspection or outdoor inspection with the crew, running through the different hazards, etc., that we could come across. We've got a very comprehensive safe work method statement, job safety analysis, risk assessment process that we have to go through. And once we get out on site, we have a pre-inspection meeting with people involved or that may be involved with the inspection. And that's got to include their responsibilities to us as the operators of the equipment. We need to make sure that their staff are not going to interfere with what we're doing. There's a huge curiosity factor involved in these inspections. There's always somebody who's going to come up with their mobile phone who wants to take a photo and see what we're doing and ask questions. And we're happy for that to happen. They can ask questions of us once we've got the job finished, but their supervisors need to be quite aware of the fact that their crew need to stay away from us so we can do the job at hand. And once the inspections are on the way, we just process through the various parts of the compartment. If it's a ship's void or a chimney stack, sometimes these can take a while. The chimney stack doesn't take all that long, believe it or not. You can do that in about an hour after 1 hour setup. 50-meter chimney stack, 2-meter diameter. With the Elios 2, it doesn't take too long. It saves so much time. And once we finish the job, we pack up, have a debrief with the supervisor or the responsible person to us who's out at the asset. And we're quite often, if we've got enough time there, we'll do the reporting and run through the data with them while we're on site. And then we start all over again.
Fantastic. Okay, and just a reminder, guys, if you have any questions at all, please ask them and we will touch on them at the end of the webinar. So, Graeme, we touched on a few of these points in the preparation and planning and being on site. Can you just briefly touch on how have your clients received the Flyability Elios, the Flyability Elios 2 over time?
Well, they love it. As an example, I was carrying out an inspection in Western Australia on a ship over there, and previously somebody else has tried to inspect this particular asset, and you'll see some photographs of this later on in the webinar, and they hadn't actually realised the benefits and the quality of the videography and the photogrammetry data, and they were leaning over our shoulder, making comments such as, "This is amazing, we didn't think it would be this good, the quality is fantastic." And this was a very dusty environment, and so with the oblique lighting on the Elios 2, it was a real game changer for them and us. We could see where we were going, and we were getting good information for the client. Without the oblique lighting, we would never have been able to do that. And they're very keen on getting us back again, carry out some more inspections. And once they see not only the short period of time to set up, and they finally realised, they always ask the question, well, how are you going to go into the compartment? Well, we're not going into the compartment. We're sending a drone in. We're sending a robotic equipment in to inspect the condition of the compartment of that space. And they don't always get it immediately, but once they see how we do it, and we take off and fly into that compartment, and we're going flying first-person view, FPV, off the monitor, they get pretty excited about it. And we find a lot of our clients come up with a lot of other means and uses for the equipment that we would never even think of. They know their assets better than anybody, and in some respects, we get pretty excited about the different assets that we're going to inspect in the future based on their need. Once they see us operating, they realise where the potential is and how they can actually get into some areas where they haven't been looked at for up to 30 years in some cases.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for that insight, Graeme. And I imagine that for a lot of your clients who haven't seen these drones operate before, it must be quite exciting.
Oh, it is. They're quite blown away. Yeah.
Graeme, as a business owner, as someone who's integrated drones into their business, can you just touch on some of the challenges that you have faced in becoming operational, and then take us through the benefits?
Probably the biggest challenge, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's getting going through the process to be issued with the REOC, the REOC from CASA. Because we are working for high-end clients, and we work in some cases pretty close to some airports. As you know, the Sydney shipping terminal is pretty close to the Sydney airport, and Cairns is the same, and Brisbane as well. So not everywhere you go, you can fly the equipment. So, and our customers want us to be as highly certified as possible, and one of the ways of doing that is being certified with CASA. So it was a really good learning curve. It took quite a long time because we had to get everything right before we lodged the application. We had some good help, assistance with others in the industry that guided us through this process. It took about 18 months. So that's probably the largest hurdle. There are barriers to overcome, but we overcame them, and people can do that if they want to put in the time and effort. When you first make that initial phone call to people, potential clients, not existing clients, they need a little bit of convincing about having a meeting. Sometimes they are not quite sure about how this works. but then the curiosity factor can overcome that challenge for us. Finding another challenge is finding, we're a small business and SME, we are in a growth stage, and finding the right type of employees with an engineering background, because operating this equipment, gathering the information, is not just being a drone pilot. There's a lot more to it than that. And we want our people to understand what they are looking at, and whether the damage is quite extensive, critical, for example, and not just simply a superficial deficiency. But look, the benefits are enormous for us. It's improved our safety. I have not been into a confined space in the last 2 years, and I personally have carried out well over 100 of these, and I haven't been into another confined space in that time. We're spending less time on site. It's a really innovative way to process and gather the information and process it. I guess our knowledge base and our skills enhancement has increased. It's a different way to run and operate the business. But we're doing the same type of inspections we've always done. But having the drones, the Elios 1 and some others, it's allowed us to diversify into other industries. But the benefits are enormous for us. They really are. And for our clients, to carry out an inspection inside a chimney stack at a sugar mill that's 50 metres high and 2 metre diameter, set up in an hour and have the inspection completed within the next hour, and then we're moving off site, that's unheard of before. The only way to do that previously was to set up a crane, a very large crane, and lower somebody down on in a dogman's cage. And these chimney stacks, they have what we call a flue wedge at the bottom, I guess you'd call it. And if you fell on top of that, it'll split you in two. So there's no way you could survive the fall. So it's been quite revolutionary for us in our business and for our clients as well.
Fantastic. Graeme, I might just pose one question to you that's been asked. How does the Elios perform with airflow in confined spaces? For example, vertical or horizontal shafts. What are the limitations that you've found there?
Well, with the Elios 1, it is affected by downdrafts, updrafts, side drafts. And to operate the Elios 1 takes quite a lot of skill. It takes skill to operate Elios 2. However, Elios 2 has got some excellent dynamic controls to it. And for example, I was last week, myself and one of the other team members, we were carrying out some inspections in quite a small compartment. These weren't much bigger than 3 metres across, maybe 2.5 metres across by 1.8 metres high, and probably, and then there were 3 compartments with a manhole access from the centre one into the forward and aft compartment. Now with the Elios 1, you really did need a second person to operate the camera, I believe, and let the other person fly the Elios 1 into those compartments, because it does become affected by air drafts. Now with the Elios 2, you don't have that issue. We flew a very stable flight, and a couple of these videos will be going up to our website within the next couple of days. The recent inspections, we need to get approval from the client for this. And you'll see on there how stable it is. And if you go on our website and have a look at the chimney exhaust stack inspection, there's video footage up on there using the Elios 2. and there's also a water tank, a potable water tank that was inspected on a ship, and you'll see how stable that is. One of the other videos we've got is a portside void on a landing barge with the Elios 1, and you'll compare the two. That's the best way to look at it. Jump on the website, have a look at the video footage, and you'll get to see the actual improvements in the Elios 2 compared to the Elios 1. It's very stable, very stable.
Fantastic. Thanks, Graeme. For the sake of time, because we are getting towards that half an hour time, we might go through, we've got a poll question here, which is, do you have an asset on your site that you think the Elios 2 could be used to inspect? And so once we're done with this, Graeme, we're going to run through the case studies very quickly, and then we will go to ask a few more questions. Fantastic. Okay, so we'll quickly run through some case studies, and Graeme, I'll go through these and you can touch on and run us through what we're looking at here, and then we'll go on to the next one.
Okay, so that's the frame on the left-hand side of the screen, rings inside an exhaust stack, up towards it's about 2/3 of the way up, and it's probably 2 meters, a little bit over 2 meter in diameter, 15 meters high, the exhaust stack. And they wanted to know the condition of those rings, and also the probe, the sensor probe on the right-hand side of the frame. Now, for them to get in there under normal circumstances, they did say to me it would have been about $20,000 worth of scaffolding, including the time to set it up, and then to make it accessible for somebody to climb up, take some photographs, and then come back out again. We did that inspection in overall 2 hours, setting up, an hour to set up, and set up the barrier tapes and signage and all the rest of it, get the equipment ready, and then fly in. Now, they got the data they needed, and they were pretty happy with the outcome.
Fantastic. So we've got another one here, an air passage vane deflector. So is this the same site?
Yeah, the same site. That deflector, vane deflector, it's at the bottom of quite a reasonably deep compartment, and they didn't need to get any scaffolding down there, but it was a bit of a tight fit, and so we carried out that inspection. We took several photographs and video footage, and that took about 10 minutes. We just spent the time, burnt up a battery on the Elios 2, and you'll notice the Elios 2 doesn't have the cage in front of it. On the right-hand side, that's an Elios 1 being used in an underground pipe passage at a sugar mill in the north, and it's probably about 900 diameter, and that pipe running off to the left was about 600 diameter, and they wanted us just to scan, fly through the underground pipe. They wanted to know the condition of the coatings, just a general inspection, nothing specific. They weren't looking for cracks in weld seams or anything, just general condition of the coatings. That inspection took about 30 minutes for that pipe, so we burnt up a few batteries on that one. But all in all, we had that job finished in about 30 minutes after setup.
Graeme, I might skip these ones for the sake of time, and we'll go through one more case study looking at the Elios 2 data.
Now, this is the recent one last week, a sewage tank on the left, a black water tank, and as you can see, it's quite a corrosive environment. Now, it has been clean jet water blasted, but normally as a surveyor, you'd have to crawl in there and take photographs and have a look at the waste district corrosion, put a report together, and let the client know what had to be cropped out and reinstated with new material. The other photograph on the right-hand side, that took 7 minutes to inspect that the compartment, the black water tank. The one on the right-hand side is the, if you look at the photo on the left of the frame, you've got those float level switches. Now, the photograph on the right-hand side, that's the back end of those float level switches. So once again, we went in there, checked the coatings, the conditions of the pipework and the frames. It's in a lot better condition. They don't have to do any work in there. And that took 6 minutes to inspect that compartment.
Great. And Graeme, just to put it in perspective again, so that black water tank on the left-hand side, you said that that took about 7 minutes to inspect. Now, if you weren't using the Elios 2, traditionally, how long would that take?
Well, they have to ventilate it for 24 hours, then they have to get gas freeing certificate, and then we need to have a rescue team on site. Sometimes they're $1,000 a day, some depending who you get, sometimes about $2,000 a day to be on site. So that compartment would normally take up to 2 days to get ready for a normal inspection. It's not big enough for staging or anything, but to prepare it and make it safe for a person to enter inside, allow 2 days, and then look, to go inside and carry out the physical inspection wouldn't take more than 10 minutes, I suppose, if I had to physically go in there and do it. But what we did, we just turned up on site, they had the hatch off, and we fired up the Elios, flew it in, and the job was finished in 6 minutes after setting up the equipment, obviously. So saved a lot of time for the client.
Fantastic, thank you, Graeme. So,
you know, can I just say something else? Using the Elios 2, and those watching the webinar can see that there's no cage hindering the view, but the way we've flown that particular that compartment, I've been able to measure the length of those frames along the deckhead, and then the pipework. There's pipework across on the far side, you can see in the background. We know how much pipework has to come out. I was able to measure the diameter, the outside diameter of the pipework, and so provided you fly in and you fly the flight plan correctly, after the mission is completed, we can measure the damage and deterioration, and then we give the client a really good idea, within 20 or 30 millimeters probably, about the amount of material that has to be replaced inside that compartment, new steel.
Fantastic, thank you, Graeme. So you can see Graeme's contact details there on the right-hand side. This webinar is recorded and will be shared to everyone that has signed up, so you will get those, and we will make those accessible after as well. So Graeme, what we'll do, there's a few questions that have come through, and we probably won't be able to answer them all today, but we will get answers back to everyone who has asked them. I will start off with one question though, Graeme. How can you ensure that your remote controller will go through obstacles, say metal objects inside a tank?
Well, the steel acts as an antenna. So we do have a range extender that we use if we have to fly the Elios down into another section of the tank if it's a long way down and a narrow compartment to get access to the bottom. But what happens is the steel will bounce the signal around. So I haven't carried out a test, but we haven't had any trouble with losing signal. If you do lose signal, it would more than likely be if you're doing an underground inspection or a concrete pipe or a concrete passage. But there is a way to understand and know when you're losing signal, when to fly back.
Fantastic.
But in steel, that's not a problem. There's not a problem in a steel compartment for us.
Great. Thanks, Graeme. Another question is, when you're on site, is the pilot actually doing the inspection, or is the recording made and then that is looked at a later date?
We record everything. All the data is recorded on the airframe, and then we download that data. It also goes to the tablet just in case something happens to the Elios and it's sitting inside the compartment for a while, but we haven't had that happen. Depending on sometimes we have to have two people, a camera operator and a person flying and operating the equipment, because if it's a fairly basic compartment, then the pilot, the operator of the equipment, can do the filming and gather all the points of interest, the photogrammetry data. That can all be carried out by one person. We always have two people on site. If it's a big job, you want to relieve the other pilot, so we have two people that can fly the equipment, because the other person will need a break. The mental stimulation in some circumstances can be quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Quite large anyway.
Thanks, Graeme. Another question. The Elios 2 is capable of performing photogrammetry. Have you had any success to date of photogrammetry of internal assets?
We are working with 3D modelling at the moment. Still getting our head around it. It's just a matter of having some more time up our sleeve when we're a little bit quieter, and maybe the COVID-19 might give us that opportunity. But the recent flights carried out last week on another vessel, they were void compartments, aluminium ones, and so they're fairly simple inspections to do. They didn't take long, so I stopped the clock basically and did some additional inspection flight work for myself, or myself and the other team member, so that we can work on doing some 3D modelling. It's achievable. We want to offer that to our clients so that the engineers, the asset managers, supervisors can actually just simply click on and put themselves into the 3D model, spin it around, turn it upside down, zoom in. That's what we're aiming to achieve. We believe we can do that with the Elios 2, and the access to a major software provider, and Sphere drones are helping us with that as well, which is excellent.
Great, thank you, Graeme. And a few questions have come through with a similar question being asked. And Graeme, have you ever had to recover the drone due to a flat battery? Have you had any stories or experience with that?
Simple answer to that is yes. Not long after we purchased Elios 1, and Elios 1 has a different lighting system than Elios 2, and this particular compartment was painted. Well, actually, it wasn't painted. It was mostly rust, and the coatings that were left inside was a red oxide. So it pretty much absorbed all the light from the Elios 1, and it was a real struggle to get out. So all you could do was act like a bee and fly to the light, and that's what we had to do. Fly towards the light that was coming through the manhole access and try and get up, but it didn't. So the Elios 1 landed itself at the bottom of the compartment, but it was too far away from the access point just to lower like a grab hook to pick it up. So at my cost, and you learn a big lesson from this, Harrison. So at my cost, we had to get the compartment ventilated, prepared for entry. I'm trained in confined space entry, and so we had to get a rescue team on standby, and then climb inside and retrieve the Elios 1. It's only ever happened once. You really have to. You've got to monitor your batteries. You've got to monitor the time you've got left. You don't want to leave it too late before you come out. So we've developed a really good system. It's never happened since. We're still getting all our information. We're still keeping our clients satisfied, and we haven't lost an Elios in a compartment since that time. So it's only happened once, but yes, you do have to be careful. You've got to monitor your systems on board the aircraft.
Thanks, Graeme. And for the listeners, Graeme was one of the very first Flyability Elios 1 owners in Australia. So it sounds like that accident happened quite a while ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago,
Graeme,
Harrison.
There we go. Fantastic. Graeme, another question. Can the same principles be applied to outdoor inspections, for example, radio masts, or would you suggest best to remain with a conventional drone?
We use high-end conventional drones for external inspections predominantly. We use equipment that can stay on station within 10 millimeters with a 46 kilometre gust of wind, high-end cameras on it. But the Elios 2, and we believe we can use that on the inside of any towers if they need to, if we can't see any of the fastenings, for example, on brackets on the inside of a tower, a structure, we could use the Elios 2. It's quite stable, but low wind conditions, and we could still get the information we need to. But in saying that, most of the time we could use the external conventional equipment that we use. Zoom in. You can always position yourself generally around a tower to get to see what you need to see. But the Elios 2, we could do the job. We haven't used it yet. We do have a bridge inspection coming up soon where it's an old bridge built in about the 1930s, and the only way to get up underneath it in amongst the steel crossbeam to members is to send the Elios 2 up there. So we're looking forward to that job. That'll be interesting. And so we'll be able to do that for the client. So we're looking forward to that one.
Great, thanks, Graeme. We've probably got time for one more question. And Graeme, what is the smallest space you have operated in?
Well, the smallest access, manhole access, needs to be 380 millimeters across for us to get the Elios 1 or the Elios 2 down inside. It just touches the inside perimeter of the access at 380 millimeters, gives you a little bit of clearance. But inside the smallest compartment we've looked at is probably, with the Elios 1, the smallest compartment was a Torrey well, which is about 2 meters deep. It's a concrete well under the ground, 2 meters deep, 1.8, 1.5 across, and probably 1.8, 1.5 wide. So that was fairly small. We can go smaller in the Elios 2 because it's got the stabilization system built into it. So and what's happening with that, we can actually spend our time inspecting the asset instead of burning up battery, getting back to where we want to look and take a photograph or video of a particular component. Because when you bounce around with the Elios 1, you can drift off and you've got to get back on station again. Look, we've built some good simulators. They're not very big. We've got, it's quite a large simulator, Elios simulator. We can fly around inside, up through some holes into the next compartment, looking for various tags that we've set up. So we do when we're not flying the machine, we do on-site training as well. Off-site training back at the office. And those compartments have been purposely built to be quite small. And they're no bigger than 800 by a metre. So that's quite small.
Fantastic. So that's going to be all we have time for today for questions. After the webinar, myself, Graeme, will be available should anyone have any further conversations and wanting to go into more detail on anything that we've discussed today. So upcoming webinars that we have on the horizon is next Thursday on the 2nd of April. We have Australian drone registration and accreditation with Tom Pills, who is the drone lawyer. And the following Tuesday, we have an introduction to drone security. So a few more exciting webinars coming up for us. Wanted to thank everyone for attending today. I hope that you got something out of the time you spent with us, and we look forward to hearing from you offline and seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you very much.